Kyle Shanahan spoke today on a conference call, and he was asked about Brock Purdy and Deommodore Lenoir speaking to the team before the Bears game. And Kyle Shanahan said that he asked them specifically to speak to the team. So my question to you is, why do you think Kyle wanted Brock and Lenoir specifically and only them to speak this week?
Gosh, I hadn't really given it a whole lot of thought.
It's interesting, right?
It's always, choice. Yeah, all these things.
Not the older guys, two young guys.
If it was me, okay, if you said to me, you're going to get a chance to interview Deommodore Lenoir and Brock Purdy, how do you feel about it? Like, how would you sell that? I would sell that this way. These are the two most honest guys on the team as far as answers. Like, these guys can't lie. These guys cannot, Lenoir can't tell you anything but the straight truth. And Brock Purdy, for the most part, answers every question straightforward. I don't know. To me, I'm not sure what you're thinking about, but to me, when I think of those two guys, I just think of guys that are respected in the room, but who speak truth almost exclusively.
I love that answer. To me, Lenoir obviously just got paid. He's in the new group of franchise cornerstones, and Purdy, most likely is going to be the next guy who's paid and get into that group. So instead of bringing in someone like Debo or Juszczyk or Warner or Kittle to bring in like veteran wisdom, Kyle Shanahan let two of the next generation step up and have a voice and assert their voice. And I thought that was really smart because the Niners have sort of been hanging on to the past, I feel like, all season. It worked last year. They had a specific formula that worked from like 2021 to 2023. And that season, that team is done. That core is old. And they have a young core on this team. And it's very much Purdy and Lenoir. Those are the two faces on offense and defense. And it's about time that Kyle Shanahan turns the team over to the youth movement. I mean, it was nice to see him actually bench Brown and not Mustafa. He trusted a rookie, Larry. To me, it's big to see him actually empower the younger players on this team because they're the ones that are actually earning it.
And it's smart. It's smart because it's an investment in your room in the future, because really you need your young leaders to start to assert themselves going forward, because the Debos and the Juszczyks are at the end and probably aren't going to be here next year. I would say Juszczyk certainly is not going to be here next year. Debo is unlikely to be here next year, but we'll see on that. Debo, I think, is a better chance to be here than Juszczyk. But yeah, they're both guys that have been the leaders in the past, and I think it's maybe Kyle and the coaching staff saying, "Hey, look, we're going to have a major leadership void here if we don't empower some of our younger leaders and better players to have an increasing voice." And also, I kind of feel like Brock probably would hang in the background, and maybe Lenoir would too, and they wouldn't necessarily, they don't seem like the kind of guys that demand to talk in front of the team, but maybe they're the kind of guys that you want to talk in front of the team.
Also, they're the kind of guys who put in the work every day, whether it's mini camp, OTAs, and everyone knows it. So they don't cut any corners. They don't think they're bigger than the team. And I mean,
they're culture players. They're culture players for this team. They embody the culture that Kyle and John want from the rest of the roster.
They hold themselves accountable too, as opposed to some of the older players, let's say Debo, who just said, "I'm not struggling. I'm just not getting the ball." I couldn't see Brock Purdy having that mentality. If he's struggling, he knows it. If Lenoir's struggling, he knows it, and they address it. And the fact that they can honestly reflect on what they're doing allows them to excel. And so I think it's really important for the Niners to change their identity from Debo Samuel leading the team down before the game with the boombox to the seriousness of Brock Purdy and Deommodore Lenoir. It's a different team.
Well, and Brock often will be like, "Hey man, I need to be better." It's like, "Hey, why aren't you hooking up with Ricky? I need to find Ricky."
Wasn't that incredible?
It's not Ricky's not open or Ricky's no. It's all.
It looked like Ricky blew that route, and he was like, "No. Ricky made the right adjustment. I loved what he did. I need to be on the same page." And I was like, Man,
Oh, and then
that
he,
probably
then he,
that,
and then
that
he
may or
said
may not be true, but that was good leadership.
And then he said afterwards, another good leadership thing. He said, and then I said to him afterwards, "Hey man," because obviously they talked, and he's like, "Hey man, this is going to come together. It's just going to take time, and
Yep.
it is going to take time. Eventually, you got to think Brock Purdy and Ricky Pearsall are made to play together in some ways because that." They just need field reps. I thought it was coming, man. When I saw them in May and minicamp, I thought, oh my God, these guys are really going to have this great season together. And it really hasn't formulated. I'm not sure why.
The only thing with these speeches and this team meeting, it feels like this should have happened weeks ago. And like, I grew up watching Steve Young, and that's my idea of like the perfect quarterback. I didn't grow up with Joe Montana. If Steve Young were on this team having this season, he would have had a lot to say to his teammates way before week 14. I mean, nothing against Brock. That's just who Steve Young was, and he was a lot older. But it seems like this is a necessary step in Brock's maturation. Like, you need to be this guy who keeps the team, in check.
I think Steve would have demanded that they fight, earlier in the year. I mean, the one thing that was encouraging about this game is that, the Niners were at their flight or fight point, right? They were either going to tuck tail and call it a season, or they were going to come out and show some resolve and really show extra fight. And I felt like they showed that extra fight, but I wanted to see that literally a month ago. I thought the most interesting part of last night's postgame, Grant, was when George came in at the end and said that, we just haven't had that edge. We haven't had that intensity. We haven't had that whatever resolve, whatever you want to call it. He was like, we just haven't had the intensity.
So
and I don't know if it's anger, focus, whatnot. I don't know. But they haven't had the juice. They're now like in this backs against the wall desperation mode. And now it's like, hey, the true identity is going to come out. And I think it's a room full of guys who want to fight. And it's a room full of guys with pretty good character. And I think, they woke up, and let's see if they can save their season in time. It's doubtful, but if they do, I'll say this. Nobody wants to play the Niners in the playoffs. Not that the Niners are some big, bad juggernaut, but nobody wants to go against Purdy or Kyle or Bosa or Trent or any of this whole roster of guys that have just played in the Super Bowl. The Niners are not necessarily everybody's favorite team to play, I think, in October in the playoffs this year. So if they can get in, maybe they can make something happen and upset some people's plans.
I mean, when Kittle talks about the team like lacking that desperation that they showed in this game, it's the truth. And again, let's bring it back to Debo, who we started the show with. Like, he sort of embodies the lack of desperation. We're good. I'm good. I'm not doing bad. The team's not doing bad. We can turn it around. Everything's fine. Like, it's Jake Moody's fault. Like, that's one part of the culture. And then you have guys like Lenoir, Purdy, Kittle that are like, no, everything's not fine. We have not had the right amount of desperation. Let's show it now. And I think it's great that part of the locker room is winning out, because that's the winner side. The other side is just straight loser nostalgia.
Well, I'll say this too. I mean, beyond that, if we're looking for some kind of, positive out of Debo's statements here, in the NFL, when you play Sunday and play Thursday, and you got that 2 games in 5 days, it's almost imperative that some new player do something in that second game that didn't do much in the first game. So if Debo wants to call himself out, if Debo wants to put the pressure on himself by saying, hey man, I need the ball. Well, guess what? He only touched the ball 5 times as a runner in this last game, and he touched the ball twice as a receiver. He had 7 touches. If they want to give him 14 touches, 20 touches in this next game and ride him, but all I would say is they're going to have to ride somebody, because you know what? Garendo's got a foot problem. You don't really have any runners. You got 2 games in 5 days, and it's an incredibly physical sport. So if he wants to call himself out and have some monster performance Thursday night to answer his own call out, then
he kind of has to have a monster performance after that.
Well, I mean, exactly. If you're saying get me the ball, I mean, Kyle's going to get him the ball in this game. Watch.
Yeah,
he's going to get the ball.